What's going on YouTube? Cloverbells here, back with another Scarlet Violet video, and today we're going to be recapping the Victory Road June Challenge number 3. Now, we actually just uploaded this video, but I had to take it down because the audio was actually relatively messed up, and that's because OBS had an update, and when OBS updates, it automatically undoes all of my settings, and because of that, that's why the video sounded like that, previously. So I took it down, and basically I have to re-record the video again. But that's okay, right? It wasn't that long of a video here, and because not too much happened with this VR tour here. So what we're gonna do is basically we're gonna compare results from this VR challenge to the results from the VR challenge number 2 from the previous week. And it seems to be like a weekly thing that Victory Road is doing because there's another one next week. So stay tuned for that. But if you're trying to get a little bit more regulationI practice, if you're going to Worlds, this is a tournament that you should be participating in because again, 200 plus participants are usually what they're getting with these big tours here, and there's a prize pool also, so you can even get some cash while you're at it. But if you're just trying to get a little bit better at regulationI in general, then you should definitely be playing in these tours if you have a chance to do so. All right, but anyway, as always, we're going to recap the usage rates along with the top cut teams, along with some other notable teams, as we always do. But the real selling point here with VR Tour number 3 was that the Miraidon Ice Rider teams took first, second, and third place, this past weekend there. So that's very, very interesting there, right? Again, of course, Calyrex Shadow Rider, Zamazenta teams are still the duo to beat, especially the ones that are featuring the paint dog, Smeargle, right? But in this VR Tour, there was only one. Actually, there wasn't. There was only one CSR Zamazenta team here, right over here in 7th place, but does not feature the paint dog here. But every other team, look at this, 1 through 8 has 7 Miraidons. Okay, we'll get into that in a second. But as always, like I said, let's look at the usage rates and just see what exactly are people bringing. All right, so let's look at the restricted pair usage. So 1 through 5, like we said in the previous recap video, this is not really going to change. There's just going to be a bunch of flip-flopping between these top 5 here. And as expected, right, just because any of these 5 can win a tournament, right? Not to say that 6 through 10 can't, but the best chance to win a large tour is going to be these top restricted pairs, just because they're so good at what they do. They enable so many partners, and overall, they just have excellent synergy with each other. They're just leagues and classes above the others, right? So of course, CSR and Zamazenta at number 1 there. And then after that, you've got Lunala Miraidon. Now, sometimes these will either be the Calm Mind variant Lunalas with the Rillaboom providing fake out. Otherwise, they'll also feature Ursaluna, where the Lunala is more of a supportive idea with the Electric Seed with Trick Room and Wyguard. All right. Then after that, you've got the Rising Miraidon Zamazenta teams. Again, these usually feature some sort of Grimmsnarl screens with Volcarona, ideally. Then after that, Miraidon and Calyrex Ice Rider. You can see there's a very high usage, a very high conversion rate over there from day 1 to day 2 there, right? You can see that there was 20 in day 1, and then of those 27 ended up in day 2 there, with of course the 3 of them being in 1, 2, and 3. And then Miraidon and Calyrex Shadow Rider at number 5 there. Sometimes these will feature the Weezings, sometimes they won't. It really just depends on how you build your CSR Miraidon team here. And honestly, it really just depends, right? You have the proven cores already. It just depends on the person piloting it and what kind of partners they want to support their restricteds, because what you'll end up doing is, or what you'll end up seeing is, you'll encounter 5 or 6 of the same mons, but they'll just have different sets, and then that'll pilot the team differently, right? And that really makes a huge difference, because sometimes, for example, let's say you have Volcarona on one team and Volcarona on another team, right? The fact that one Volcarona has Tailwind and the other one doesn't, and then the other one that doesn't have Tailwind is more of a Quiver Dance set, that really changes how the Volcarona plays, because instead of being a supportive mon, you end up being the late game sweeper, the late game win condition on your team, right? And that really makes a huge difference in the best of 3 format, right? But if we compare VR challenge number 2, this is the previous week's. Oh wait, no, right here. Yeah, see, look at this. So 1 and 5 are the same, right? CSR Zamazenta and then CSR Miraidon here. And now we're just flip-flopping between 2, 3, and 4, right? So now, previous week, Lunala Miraidon was number 4. Now it's number 2 over here, but there was only 2 in day 2, whereas over here there were 7 in day 2, right? So that's a huge difference, right? So you have to kind of read between the percentages a little bit. And then same thing over here, Miraidon Zamazenta, 10% day 2 usage, 5 were in day 2 from the previous week's VR challenge. But in this one, just 3, right, with 7% day 2 usage there, right? So it really just depends on, you know, the given week, and, you know, who's participating also has a factor. And then, you know, what matchups you pull will also affect some of these results here. But overall, you can clearly see what are the top 5 restricted pairs without a doubt here. And then after that, you'll get the occasional, you know, Zamazenta, Kyogres, or even like the Miraidon Terrapagos teams that are also featuring Sinistra all of a sudden, right? That is still a thing that you have to be aware of, right? But anyway, these other restricted pairs, they are not as dominant as some of these in the 1 through 5 slot over here. So just bear in mind there. Not to say that these can't win. Of course they can, right? But your best chances are always going to be 1 through 5. So if you're new and if you're trying to pick a restricted pair, if you want like immediate results or like the best kinds of results, then you're looking at 1 through 5 over here. Okay. So other than that, you know, well, if you take a look here, like you have the dominant ghost types here with the fighting type, especially 1 and 5 here. But, you know, of these 5 restricted pairs, 3 of them involve a Miraidon of some sort, because Miraidon is just really, really good. Okay. And the way you build each one of these Miraidon variants can vary a little bit, but all in all, sometimes they'll run the Scarf variant, sometimes the Assault Vest variant, sometimes even just the straight up Specs variant that you've come accustomed to seeing. But, you know, depending on these Miraidon teams and how they're built, they'll have a different item, especially the Scarf variant, which is what you're going to see in the first, second, and third place team here, right? But what I want to do is also take a look at the overall uses of the non-restricteds, because that is also part of the story that we're trying to tell within this meta recap. All right, so let's take a look at this. All right, so over here, if we compare VR Challenge Tour number 2 versus VR Challenge Tour number 3, which was this past weekend, there's some similarities here, especially 1 through 5. All right, more or less the same. The only difference is there's a flip-flop between the Urshifu and the Rillaboom, right? Chenpao is still very, very good, especially when it's paired with Zamazenta and some of these other physical attackers like Urshifu. You get to remove terrain, you have Priority Sucker Punch, you have Crunch, and then of course the occasional tech of Runation to chip Lunalas, so this way you can break their Shadow Shield, right? And then Reggie-Bolt is just a really, really strong Pokemon in general, especially on those CSR Zamazenta balance teams, regardless of whether or not they have Smeargle or not. Thunderclap is really good with, you know, again, a strong priority move, especially against Urshifu. Then you have, you know, Volt Switch. Occasionally, you can even do Electro Webs for speed control. Otherwise, you can also do like the straight up Draco Meteor Nuke. And then, you know, these Raging Bolts, they're either Life Warp, they're Magnet, they're Booster Energy, anything to really boost up their damage. Assault Vest is not used as much, but there is some AV Raging Bolts running around, you know, just to be a little bit more supportive. Those are usually the Electro Web variants, right? But take a look at this. Look who's at number 7 over here, right? This is Smeargle, 20% in day 2. 9 Smeargle teams in day 2 here. If you looked at the previous VR challenge, Smeargle was number 13. It was already on the upward trends here, but now we just went from 13th to 7th, right? Almost 50% increase, right? So that was very, very interesting there. And then look at Iron Hands drop, right? Look all the way down to 15th place here. 7%, only 3 teams had Iron Hands, whereas in the previous week, Iron Hands was number 7. There were 7 day 2 teams with an Iron Hands on it. So that was a little bit of a choice there, right? But, you know, that's quite the drop from 7 to 15 there. But it just goes to show you that Raging Bolt is a little bit more of the preferred electro type right now that isn't Miraidon. So, but yeah. But in general, Iron Hands is still like a very, very good bond, especially in the Trick Room games. You know, you've got Fake Out Pressure, you have Low Kick, which does 50% to Ice Rider, especially in the terrain. You really put a damper on the opposing Miraidon matchup just because Low Kick does so much, and Miraidon can't really hit you all that well unless it commits to Dazzling Gleam, but that's also why you have the Assault Vest. And then after that, look at Volcarona here. So 9, it's up to 9th place over here, 15%, 7 Volcarona teams in day 2 for this past week's VR challenge, right? But if you go back to the previous week, Volcarona's at number 6 there, 13%, 6 Volcarona teams, right? Now you've got 7, so more or less the same. right? But it just goes to show you how good Volcarona is right now in regulationI. Again, both that supportive set and that offensive Quiver Dance set as a endgame win condition. But you want to know what else is interesting here? The placement of the prankster Pokemon. Whimsicott Tornadus here, 6 and 10, and then Grimmsnarl almost dropping out of the top 12 graphic completely here. No Grimmsnarl teams in day 2. Okay, that's very interesting because once upon a time, Grimmsnarl was within the top 6 in some of these regionals, right? Just because of the screen support that it can give you, mitigating all this damage against the big restricteds. But now, you're not getting any day 2 Grimmsnarl teams, whereas previous week you still had some Grimmsnarl, right? A little, 13%, 6 Grimmsnarl teams in day 2, but now all of a sudden none in day 2 there. That might just be like, a weekend thing, and who knows what will happen in July when we have this VR tour next week. But I just think it's a little bit telling that Grimmsnarl is starting to drop a little bit out of favor there, and part of that is because the taunt that is running on some of these mons, especially the non-prankster taunts, right? So that's also one thing that you have to be aware of. And then, some of the fairy covers on some of these mons is actually very interesting too, right? But all in all, I just think, Grimmsnarl will always find its way in the meta, especially in a meta where there's like a bunch of damage running around. It just depends on the people piloting it. But all in all, I do expect Grimmsnarl to do a little bit better than what it did this past weekend. I think 0% in day 2 is a little bit extreme. But we'll see what happens in the next upcoming week here. Fluttermane, again, hasn't been as impressive in this format as it has in others. Like, you're getting the occasional support, with Icy Wind, Thunder Wave, and Taunt, of course. But overall, just 2 teams in day 2 there. And even in the previous week, it was also, also in 12th place there, right? Just 2% there. 1 Fluttermane team in day 2 there. So maybe not once the S tier mon that it once was, but not because it's bad, but it's just because it's the meta that we're in right now. So much Calyrex, right? Astro Barrage, you're the faster ghost type, and naturally, if you counter the Shadow Rider, you're countering Fluttermane a little bit better as well, right? Just because of the ghost resist or the ghost immunity that you might have. Okay, and the bulk sometimes against Chenpao, especially the Life Orb Chenpao, it can't really take that sucker punch anymore, so the Fluttermane usage just drops considerably, but it's still relatively useful on those Miraidon teams, especially because of photosynthesis, right? But again, it's still a very, very good mod. It's still like within the A tier reach, of course, but it's a different meta than what it once was in previous months. Now you get some of the ground types here. So look at this: Landorus, Iron Treads, and Ursaluna here. They're rounding out within the top 20 here. Again, ground types very important in this format too, just because of the use they have against the Miraidon Iron Hands teams, right? So Iron Treads, again, immunity to electric. You can blow up terrain with Steel Rollers. Landorus, same thing. You're faster than Chiyu by 1 point. And Ursaluna, you're just a ground type that also has normal typing, which again gives you good immunity into the Shadow Rider anyway. So yeah, and also has pretty good synergy with Lunala as well, right? But what's interesting with Ursaluna here is, again, look at this. 0 Ursalunas in day 2 also, right? So that's also important to notice, because again, you had a decent amount in day 1. 16 teams had it, but again, not so much in day 2 there, right? And then after that, the trailers, stuff like Indeedee, Sinistra, Weezing, Clefairy, they'll always find their way on some of these niche archetypes, right? But there's still some good use there, right? Especially the Weezing teams with Miraidon and Calyrex Shadow Rider. Indeedee sometimes can be on some of those Trick Room teams. Otherwise, it's just there for, like a little bit of terrain control. Another Trick Room setter, of course. And then, that's pretty much it here. But all in all, like some of the things that are noteworthy as opposed to the previous week's VR Tour Challenge. No Grimmsnarls in day 2. Decline of Iron Hands. Smeargle and Volcarona look very, very good right now. They continue to rise, and the Tailwind stuff is prevailing a little bit more now over the screens idea. All right, so now what we want to do is let's go back to the teams here, and let's take a look at this top 8, and let's see if we can find anything noteworthy in terms of meta development. Starting at number 1 here, our winner, Jungso Lee, right? He's running his variant of Miraidon and Ice Rider, and this is the Scarf Miraidon. And again, all 3 of them had Scarf Miraidon. So again, if you don't want to really play the mirror mind games and you're just looking for some way to get an advantage, but not necessarily commit to the Whimsicott, the Scarf Miraidon is an idea. You've got Volt Switch and Snarl here. Again, Fast Snarl is really important, right? Because you can really pin those other Lunalas, those other Shadow Riders, those other Miraidons for matter, right? And then after that, you can always just pivot out if you really want to. And then Landorus, Instant, Amoonguss is another good core with Calyrex. Again, the Bolt Beam coverage overall, right? That's the reason why this duo works. Think Electric coverage, think Ice coverage, aka Bolt Beam coverage, as we like to call it in VGC. Very, very good combination, just in terms of the attack damage, just because they cover for each other's weaknesses and whatnot. But the supporting core with Instant and Amoonguss, that defensive backbone that you need for a good solid VGC squad is always there. It's AV Instant with Terra Bug over there, and then Urshifu with the Aqua Jet priority move, Surging Strike, Close Combat, Focus Sash there, relatively standard. But overall, be prepared to see this team, you know, more and more. We have been seeing it, right? It's just that it got 1, 2, and 3 over here. And then what's making all the difference is, of course, the Volcarona and some of the sets here. But this is a Fiery Dance, Quiver Dance set with Electric Seed. So Volcarona is getting a defense boost here. And then with the Intimidate support, you can actually make this relatively bulky from the physical end. Then you've got the Giga Drain over here, along with Quiver Dance, Terra Grass here. That can also be very, very good against like other Urshifus for that matter. But a way to boost up your special defenses. And again, this is really good against Zamazenta teams because they don't like Volcarona at all, because the Bug Fire typing resists both of its stab moves, which are, of course, Fighting and Steel. And then you can just destroy them immediately after one Quiver Dance, potentially with a Fiery Dance combination, sometimes two, if depending on their EV spreads, of course. But Volcarona can even wall out the Shadow Riders, just because if it can get enough Quiver Dances, all those special defenses, the Shadow Rider is going to have a tough time breaking it, especially if it's a Sash variant. It's going to need nasty plot setups to be able to outpace the Quiver Dances, but at that point it might be too late, because you still need some time to be able to set that up too, right? But yeah, you've got the Trick Room mode here, which is very, very good. Then Volcarona can come in and finish things off, or you can even start your strong, depending on how you want to play it. Juan Garcia over here, it's got the same team more or less. So again, nothing really else that you really need to see from there. But like I said earlier, there's 7 Miraidons. 3 of them had Choice Scarf over here. Let's look at the 4th place team here. This is the one that you've seen in previous regionals. Trick Room Wide Guard support with Miraidon here. Surprisingly, there's no Ursaluna here, but again, Landorus is just a little bit more favored right now, just because it's faster, right? And then, you know, with Whimsicott Tailwind support, you are able to, you know, outpace those Choice Scarf Chiyus. Xavier Instant Terra Bug again. This is the banned Urshifu, of course, and this is the Specs Miraidon. So Lunala, again, with Wide Guard here, you help against the Glacial Lance coverage, you know, against the Miraidon and the Landorus here, which they don't like at all, but very much enjoy the Wide Guard support. Okay, then we've got the niche Terrapagos Miraidon teams with Sinisha. This is the Sash variant, of course, and then this is Calm Mind Terrapagos here. You'll probably see this a little bit more as we get closer to Worlds, but here's that strong ground type here with Iron Treads here, as opposed to something like Landorus. Iron Treads also works relatively well, just because you've got Court Drive here with Choice Band. It's going to do a lot of damage. Rock Tomb is a choice. I like that move. It's a good speed control option. Then you've got the Nielsen brother, who's also just straight up using his comfort pick, the Sneasler here with the Electric Seed on Burden Boost. I don't know anybody else not named Nielsen that's using Sneasler Miraidon. All right, if there is, feel free to tell me in the comment below. But besides that, you've got the Tailwind and Trick Room mode here. Fergaf, again, with the Armor Tail, is just making sure you can't click priority moves against Miraidon. With the Choice Specs, of course, you can't click Protect against Fake Out. So this is why Fergaf definitely can come in and change everything for you. All right, so that's really, really cool. And then CSR Zamazenta without the Paint Dog here, pretty balanced. Standard stuff here. Instant Rillaboom with Nasty Plot, Life Orb set, you know, and then the Tornadus is also relatively standard. And then finally over here, maybe the lone dual pairing right here with the Shadow Rider and Miraidon. A lot of this, you know, this looks like a pretty standard Miraidon team besides the Shadow Rider. Look, you've got Iron Hands and Fergaf and Whimsicott. That's like your core there. That's been the core for Miraidon teams, even dating back to Regulation G. And then you add the Chiyu here. Very, very good pairing. Also, just destroys Rillabooms if they want to bring that into you, as well as Indeedis if they want to bring that into you as well. Other than that, then sometimes you'll probably see like Lunalas on this, but the Shadow Rider is an interesting partner over here, just because again these are two dominant special attackers. There's not like as much synergy as there was like maybe the Ice Rider, for example, but Shadow Rider still works out here and is able to claim a place over there, right? So now what we want to do is, it's just an interesting top 8, right? You've got 7 Miraidons, but of the 7 Miraidons, 3 of them involve the Ice Rider, okay? And then after that, there's just like a little bit more variance depending on some of these teams here. But let's look at some of these ideas that people have been using, and let's see if we can paint more of the picture besides the top 8. I want to take a look at some of these CSR Smeargle teams for a second here, because they might have the same core when you match up against the mirror, but what's really going to make a difference is the rest of the supporting cast, and that'll determine how you play the rest of the team here. So for example, let's look at this one right here from 9th place here from Mr. Suggy. Suggy here is saying, look, I've got the Smeargle here, but look at this. I've got Spore, Fake Out, Decorate, Follow Me. Pretty standard stuff. Zamazenta, Wide Guard support, Raging Bolts, Booster Energy, and then Tornadoes for a little bit of speed control in the fast mode, right? And this is something that we featured on the channel before in a battle video, so feel free to check that out if you haven't done so already. But this is like your cookie cutter Smeargle CSR Zamazenta team, right? Then if you look at this one from Yoav Reuven, okay, this one actually involves the Incineroar as opposed to Raging Bolt here. But again, more or less the same idea. But take a look at the difference here with the Smeargle. It's got Wide Guard, and that might make you, wait, I got 2 Wide Guards on this team? But no, look at this. Zamazenta doesn't have Wide Guard. Instead, it has Imprison, and that is going to make a big difference, right? Because a Zamazenta with Imprison versus a Zamazenta without Imprison, who's going to win that matchup? The one with Imprison, right? Because you get to shut down the other Zamazenta, and now the Smeargle is the one providing Wide Guard support as opposed to the Zamazenta. So that's very interesting. And then look at this. This is like a Draining Class Nasty Plot set as opposed to a Psychic Stab, right? And it's Terra Fairy too with spell tag. So the Fairy coverage is also going to be really good against the Dark types that it may run into. So, that's, again, another way to play this. And this is, again, still like a relatively standard Tornadoes, right? But that makes a huge difference in the mirror matchup. Then look at this one. Actually, I think this is more or less the same one, right? As opposed to the other ones. Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. Oh, this one involves the Indeedee, right? So look at this. So back to Wide Guard on Zamazenta and no Wide Guard on Smeargle, but you've got the Indeedee here for a little bit of terrain. And you've got Baton Pass on it, right? We've seen this rise a little bit in some of the other previous tours. Baton Pass Indeedee. That just helps you get a little bit more terrain control, right? Just because, if Miraidon just wants to bolt switch and pivot out and re-pivot out later, you can Baton Pass and get yourself out of there and then bring something else in and give something else a special defense boost, especially, your Zamazenta, right? So you've got terrain on your hand, right? You've got Baton Pass for a little bit of pivot, and then the Shadow Rider here is just straight up nasty plot. And then again, the Sharp Beak Tornadoes is something that's also been rising a little bit more as of late, as opposed to the Covert Cloak idea, right? But that's just one I really wanted to show you. Again, like some of the core may stay the same, but some of these other pieces will make all the difference here. All right, but other than that, what else do we have here? So Pato here is running the Calm Mind Pagos Miraidon idea, but again, this is AV Miraidon, right? And this is the Clear Amulet Treads as opposed to Choice Band. With Protect, and it's got Ice Spinner too, so that's going to make a big difference in some of the mirror ideas. Then you've got Guillermo Castillo. I think it's been like a year since he's played, right? I think he even tweeted that. So, welcome back, Guillermo, I guess. But he's, just capitalizing on this whole Miraidon idea, which, again, had its 15 minutes of fame in the beginning of the format, but has fallen off quite a bit. But here we are. Look at this idea, though. You've got AV Miraidon here as opposed to Specs, and it's, pretty standard, Ho-Oh there. But look at the Sinistra here making an appearance here, and that's pretty cool. Like Sinistra and Ho-Oh, pretty good synergy, right? Because when you switch out the Ho-Oh and bring in the Sinistra, not only do you get recovery on your Ho-Oh, but when Sinistra comes in its place, the partner Pokemon gets recovery too because of Hospitality. So it's a nice little combination there between the two. And then, of course, you still have the Iron Treads, the strong ground type here. Chien-Pao's going to do a lot of damage. It's got Protect here, so you got Trick Room and Tailwind on this team. So this is actually a pretty cool adaptation to the Ho-Oh Miraidon idea. So shout outs to Guillermo for coming up clutch here with this idea. All right, then after that, what else are we looking at here? Some of the Calyrex CSR teams, right? Again, they both have Wheezing. This one has Poison Gas, which means we're going to chip things down and put things in range for the Astral Barrage. This is Imprison Calyrex. There we go. Of course, we have the ability Shield Miraidon. And Jump Pluff, again, with Tailwind and Sleep Powder, just gives you outs in certain matchups that normally you would not have an out for, right? You know, you just have to make sure you hit your Sleep Powders. And then this one, Vichy, right? He's got the Indeedee here. It's got Expanding Force too. So you have, you know, double spread move here. You also have a single target move with Shadow Ball, all right? But this Wheezing, it still has Poison Gas, right? But it's Covert Cloak. The Miraidon does not have a ability shield, so you would turn off your own ability if you have the Wheezing and the Miraidon at the same time. But you can just always pivot out, in and out, right? So that's what they were doing. Then after that, by the way, there were 2 Rayquaza teams here, and that was the other thing that I noticed in this video too. Like 2 Rayquaza teams. It's actually quite interesting. So let's take a look at this here. So, you know, this is as I expected of a Rayquaza, right? It's got Dragon Ascent and Extreme Speed, and then here's the Swords Dance idea, right? So I'm surprised to not see a Chenpao here, but again, still makes sense. It's Terra Normal, again, a little bit more damage out of your Extreme Speed. Rayquaza does a lot of damage, but what else does it bring to the table? Airlock, right? So you can shut down other weather teams like another Miraidon, like another Kyogre, for example. The Tailwind Tornadoes teams, of course. But I don't know what is the reasoning besides this. You know, I don't think you need double dragons here, but here we are, okay? So that was pretty interesting. 6-3 is actually really, really cool. After that, you know, you got the lone Zamazenta Kyogre team over here. Pretty good synergy with a lot of these guys, right? Iron Jugulus and Landorus, of course. Actually, there's no Hurricane here. It's actually just Air Slash. So, okay, that's still okay, right? Zamazenta, Chenpao, and Amoonguss. There's your other core there, of course. And this is AV Kyogre, by the way. So, pretty cool team. All right, another Groudon appearance. There's always at least one Groudon tour in any kind of big tournaments, right? This is Instant P2 Groudon, right? So, you know, you can play the slow mode with Trick Room. Otherwise, you're going to rely on more Jump Pluff stuff. So you can definitely consider that. This is actually Life Orb Miraidon with Terra Electric Protect. Okay, so that's another interesting way to use it. And then here's the Chiyu. You need that a little bit more additional dark coverage for the Shadow Riders, right? And again, Chiyu has pretty good synergy with both ideas. Boosted fire damage in the sun and helps Miraidon do a little bit more damage. Terra Flying P2. That's probably for the Urshifu matchup, especially with Terra Blast there. You've got Shadow Ball for the Shadow Riders, and then you are super bulky with the Trick Room idea. Again, P2, a little bit more of an underrated niche pick here. So nice to see the Porygon make an appearance here. Okay, this is another Paint Dog variant with Clefairy here. Protect, Follow Me, Encore, Helping Hand. So no other attack move as expected. You know, you've got the redirection and the fake out support here. Actually, you've got double fake out and double redirection here. So more than one way to set up this nasty plot. And then what else is actually pretty normal? We got King Camel here, which of course he's using his Zacian team here, right? So no surprise here. So shout out to Kian for just being a true warrior with Swordfish. Okay, you know, I don't know anyone else that's utilizing it right now besides Kian, right? He's the main go-to guy. Let's take a look at this 5-3 Rayquaza Lunala team. This is very interesting. I've never seen this pairing before. It's called my Lunala. I understand the 5 around it. I don't know why we need a Rayquaza here though. That's the one that's, you know, puzzling me there. But hey, we've got the same set. It's got Dragon Ascent, Extreme Speed, Swords Dance, right? Big giant priority nuker, right? So I guess it makes sense. We've got another interesting pick here. We've got Miraidon and Terrapago. It's a little bit more of an unconventional idea, but again, it's Calm Mind Pagos. And look at this Volcarona set. Oh, look at this. Hold on a second. This is a set, right? We've got Struggle Bug, got Rage Powder, okay? Support moves, Overheat for your 1 nuke, and then we've got Morning Sun for the recovery. Holy smokes. How about that? Morning Sun with the sun, of course, right? A little bit more extra recovery there. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, other than that, what else am I looking for here? This is another one. This one is another CSR Zamazenta team with Iron Jugulus instead. Is this Marcus's team? I think yes, it is. All right. Yeah, we've seen Marcus use this squad before. But yeah, those were some like noteworthy teams there, right? Some of the Rayquaza teams, some of the Miraidon CSR teams, right? The lone Groudon team, like we mentioned, and a couple of these Iron Jugulis teams that are running around as well. So all in all, nothing really crazy that we haven't seen before, except for some of these niche ideas. But again, this is where you want to try these ideas, right? Like these online tours, you want to try and experiment some of this stuff, you know, before you head into Worlds, right? Or before you head into like some in-person tournament that you may still have. You know, the online tours is where you want to try some of this stuff, right? So, but all in all, we know where a lot of the top teams are going to be looking for here, right? It's just all of this CSR Zamazenta teams. Like, look how often they are within the top cut here, especially all these Miraidon squads here. Like, my goodness, two of the best restricteds right now. But let's see what July holds, right? I'm very curious to see if Grimmsnarl can make a stand against some of these other restricteds here. I thought 0%, like I said earlier, was just a little bit extreme. But let's see what July brings up forth, right? But these Miraidon CIR teams are looking really, really good right now. I wonder if that may be the way to go moving forward into Worlds. But again, we just have over a month left. There's still so much more time to experiment and try different things. But yeah, let me know what you think of this VR tour, and let me know what you think just of the format in general, right? Maybe you might want to let me know what you're trying right now and what your experience has been with regulationI so far, because we're hitting the halfway point, right? Because May's gone, June is gone, now we're in July, and then we have August, right? And then that's it for regulationI. So we're officially at the halfway point. So let me know your thoughts on regulationI thus far. And yeah, moving forward, we're gonna feature a couple more teams here. We got a Reshiram team that we want to use, especially like Choice Specs Terapagos. That's also something that someone shared with us as well. We'll be looking to feature that as well. I think we can get a couple more rental teams out for July. Don't count on it just yet. It's pretty hard to find people to make these, but we'll see what I can do this time around. But anyway, that's it for now, folks. We'll be back with another video in the next one. Peace out. Have a good one.